Okay, this probably seems a little basic, but when I'm importing files into Lightroom, this is how I do it. I've found that this is kind of the fastest way where I'm not screwing around with a whole bunch of file directories over here. What I do is I'll take whatever folder all the photos are in. You can select all of them if you want, but you can just take one and you go to import. I'm in library and you go to import, and you just have to take one file and drag it into the middle here. And it'll do this. You hit check all and then hit import. It's super fast. I used to get over here and would try to drill down and find the folder and everything, but you don't have to do that. And excuse me, you'll see that everything will run. I don't even really wait on it. I just go ahead and hit develop. Now I'm over here, and that's pretty much it when it comes to importing files into Lightroom. Okay, so when I'm adjusting different pictures, I've got a couple of presets over here. I used to take these presets and go all the way to where I wanted, but I found that different properties with different lighting just call for the sliders to either go a little bit further one way versus the other. So what I did is I created some presets that got me started, and then I could go in and just touch them up just a little bit. So for instance, I called this one outside light, and then I have one outside where you'll see a slider over here. It's called darks, that I use to kind of bring out the greens. But like this one, outside light, it looks really good. These trees come out. Go over here. Every once in a while, after I've hit the preset, I'll adjust the exposure and say, oh, you know what, that looks good, brighter. And sometimes I'll need to knock it down, and by bringing it down, it'll bring it to the tone that it needs to be. Real estate agents love for photos to have a very clear look. So like this would be a bit too dark. Probably about as bright as we'd want to go right there, which isn't too far from where the preset was. I don't mess a lot with contrast. The highlights, a lot of times these highlights, I'll bring them all the way down. But what I've found is when I'm outside, it really makes the sky turn more of a purple, and it's just not necessary. It's more, you want to bring those highlights down more when you're on an interior photo and you're trying to get where you can see through the windows. So the shadows is one where you'll see underneath here, under porches and stuff like that. It'll bring it out where you can see what's under there. So again, I don't normally slide it all the way, but sometimes I do. I find that when I bring these shadows down and I bring the darks back down, it almost adds the color richness back instead of washing it out. It kind of washes everything out. But every once in a while, it's necessary. I think it's kind of cool to see under that porch right there. So I'm up enough. If you hold down your Alt key, this is something that's very common. I don't mess with this much, but every once in a while I will. You can get your whites to be exactly where they need to be. You want them where they're just showing. I find that after I've processed photos in Photomatics, this is not as necessary. You can see the blacks are showing there. So I really don't even mess with this much. If it's a photo that hasn't been merged, I'll get into doing both of those. You just hold down the Alt key and you slide it whichever direction where you start to see a little bit of action, that means that the blacks are really black right there, and so you back it off just a little bit. Clarity, a lot of times I go to the right on clarity. It's gonna harden the photo. You go left, you know, you get that real soft, brushed out look. More times than not, the agents want to see what they think is a lot of definition, so I find myself on the right. But every once in a while, in like a bathroom or in some landscape, if I want it to look a little more even and soft, kind of that old school senior picture look or whatever, I'll go soft, but usually I keep it here. And then these two are real tricky. You know, these greens look really good right now. This is at 25 off of this outside light. Normally I'm forced to knock that down to about 15 because normally the greens they just look really saturated. So again, that's case by case, but you know, those are the initial sliders. That's exactly what I do. Once I get past saturation and vibrance and clarity, there's these, and you have to drop these down. Sometimes they may not be open for you. So the tone curve, I really never messed with this, but again, when you take these darks and you start to bring them down, again, this particular photo doesn't need it, but a lot of times you'll bring back a lot of the rich green in the grass, especially if it's the front of a house or something. In this particular case, I'll probably knock it down just a little bit, but you'll notice with it being dark, so whatever you pulled out of your shadows, some of that's going to get added back, and you won't necessarily be able to bring it out with this. If you notice, that's just barely made the adjustment. So I don't start pushing a lot of these back and forth, you know, to contradict each other. But the cool part about the darks is, you know, it'll darken up certain areas without adding back all of the shadows that you took out here. If there were any of these that I use very regularly these days, it's this, because it takes that washed out look and it brings it back. You know, the roof gets its color back, a lot of this gets its color back, and it just makes in my opinion, the photo a little bit more vibrant. And then I also, because I deal with so many homes, I'll deal with these greens. I'll start looking at what it looks like to darken these greens up. I don't really go that direction. Every once in a while I will, but a lot of times I'll bring these greens down. That's something I do a lot of in the yellow, because that's usually your grass and your bushes and stuff like that. I deal with that, and every once in a while I'll mess with the blue in the sky, which we'll probably see in a little bit. This particular preset, I already knocked up the sharpness. Every once in a while I can barely tell a difference. I can tell a difference in this zoomed in pane right here. A lot of times, like on the bricks outside of a house, I'll knock that sharpness up to like 20. But for this type of shot, that's really it. I didn't have to rotate this. A lot of times I have to rotate it. You know, that's right here. I actually click on this and use my mouse. I'll go up or down, and what I look for usually is right in the middle. I'll look like this beam right here, because if this home were at a slant, you know, that beam might be straight, but at the end of the building might look curved. You know, I try to find whatever's in the middle and make, you know, if it's the inside of a room, I'll make it look straight, which I'll get into that because I'm sure it'll happen here shortly. But anyway, and then cropping. You know, if I need to crop this, which this particular photo I do not, I would, then I'm done. Let's see here. You know, this one, you know, that doesn't look bad. That looks better. Again, that's in my outside light. Apparently with this property, it's making it look good. But I feel like everything is leaning a little bit, just a touch to the right. So this is one where I would take it and literally just barely. You'll see like a 20 or a 30 over here. But you can tell it just looks a lot better up and down. Again, this particular photo doesn't need to be cropped. Any chance I get, when you go down to these colors, you can select this tool. As long as it doesn't look weird, I try to bring the sky out. So I will click and hold here and pull down a little too much. But right there looks natural, and it looks just a bit better. You can see this cloud a little bit better. The blues are a little bit stronger. You just click here. I believe that you have to make sure that luminance is selected for that, and you can do it with saturation. I'll use the luminance. I'll use this tool. You click and hold, and you drag up or down. That is another technique that I use a lot of. Okay, so that photo looks pretty good. That looks fine. A lot of times I'll tweak this exposure just to make sure it's where I want it. And it looks like I bumped it up a little bit. I go by sight. I try not to look at the number, and because I find that I'll be partial. I'll be like, oh, that's too high of a number or too low of a number. I just look at the photo when I do it. When I pulled those highlights down, you can see that sky got a little bit better. So I'll do that, and then I'd probably add back some of these shadows. You see how this gets where it's not so washed out? I can still see under that porch really well, so that was a really good idea there. I pulled that down, and I do this on pretty much every photo, as needed. And again, I usually find myself knocking this 25 down. I wanted to create another preset, but I really just don't think it looks that bad on this particular photo. A lot of times it'll make these the woods, it'll make them look really orange, but in this case it doesn't look bad. So maybe leave that at 20. And I haven't pulled my darks down. Again, that just brings that, it's almost like it brings moisture back into the picture. It doesn't wash it out as much. So I bumped it down just a touch, but I feel like that looks pretty good. So another technique that I'll use, especially, so this is basically the same scene, and this may or may not work in this case, but a lot of times the lighting will be virtually the same. I've made some adjustments to my preset. I'll hit copy. I don't copy, crop, or any adjustments or anything. So if you need to pause it and take a look at this, hit copy, and then I come over here and I hit paste, which sometimes, there it is. It gets me really close really fast. This one needs to be tweaked about like that. So again, you'll see about a 40 right there, but I don't need my porch looking slanted, so I may even go just a little bit more. Yeah, it's about 60. You see that beam right here looks really good. My sky doesn't look too bad because again I copied it out from the other one. This photo doesn't need to be cropped. I am going to bring that sky up a little bit. It looks a little bit grainy, like with a blue grain, which does not look good. Look how far down that is. So I just click it and I go and click up. I'd rather it be almost not there or just blue than to have these weird grain lines in it. So that's fine. And then since it is a little dark under this porch, I ended up bringing that all the way up to 100, And I don't think that that looks bad. I think that looks real clean under here. I don't think it washes the photo out. It's exactly how I would do that, you know. That gives it a little bit of a dark look. This is that bright look we're looking for. And I still feel like that beam is off a little bit. So I'm at 80. Now when you adjust the angle here, it's going to auto crop it for you. When we get into doing some of the distortion, you'll actually have to click this unless you feel like dragging these in every time, and it'll bring the crop in to where you don't have any white around the edges, which I'll show you. But that looks good. Okay, so here's an interior photo. Obviously this is looking very dark. I've got some interior settings. Again, wood can be really tricky, and this whole property is interior is wood. That does not look bad at all. You know, I immediately can see that this is off. It's leaning to the left, so that's probably something that you notice a lot of. But you know, you get these lines in here that help you line it up. Sometimes I'll look at this. A lot of times I'll look at this center line right here. Look at doors, windows, and you know, sometimes you'll have some that look good, and for whatever reason the other ones look off. And I've got some ways to adjust that in the distortion, but you know, sometimes you just got to let it go. But you'll see, usually in the bathrooms or whatever is when I'll tweak that, the distortion. So that's done. You know, I was in the house and I knew I was getting this flare right here. I'm not gonna stress out over those. If it's something that you're good at fixing real quickly, there's a way to do that. But you know, it's just, you got to pick your battles, and that's not one that I'm particularly concerned about. If it's a flare that's right over an area that I can use the spot removal and heal, I will. But I knew that this was going to be weird right here. Let's see here. Exposure inside, usually want to knock it way up. You see how clean that room looks now? And here's the weird thing is I find that when it exports it, it almost looks darker than it does when I've got it. Another thing I'll do, or I've started doing, is I'll knock this one down, I'll knock this one down so I can see the room better. And when you hover over it, those will pop out. But I've got a bigger picture here to work with. I don't feel like that's too much. I mean, that's not bad, and I can still see out of these windows really well. The highlights are brought down. You know, that's where the windows start blowing out. Just bring those down. And I'm always really careful about going 100%. In this case, it doesn't look horrible, but usually if you're 100% down on the highlights and 100% up on the shadows, it'll have almost a surreal HDR look to it. And I used to do that, and I've found that my clients don't care for that as much as I do. So I try to make the room look as realistic as possible and clean and sharp. Let's see what this looks like. So, you know, I'm able to move that for what it's worth. Again, I don't really mess with those. There's the clarity, the vibrance, and everything on the inside. You'll notice I have these down because usually with wall paint or, again, wood, it just doesn't help. You see I've got my darks knocked down just a touch. And all of this is left. This is at 0, but you can knock it up. But everything's pretty good. You know, that's why I've got that preset done. Because on interior photos, there's not a whole lot. Here's a flare. With these, if this were a wall, just a plain wall, but with this wood, I don't know if I can really fix that very easily. So I'm not even. I mean, we can try. Let's see, spot removal. And I adjust the brush down, and I've got it on heal. Let's see if it'll heal that up. And just drag this over here. Yeah. So basically it makes a mirror image of whatever's in this circle. I mean, I'm just not that interested in doing that. I'm gonna hit Control Z. I don't need any odd. I don't need anybody all of a sudden zooming in like, what the hell? Especially a client or somebody like that. I'd just rather leave it. Okay, so for this room, I feel like that's fine. Let's see what else we got. You know, this is that same room. So, you know, it's funny. I'm thinking the program is that's not a glitch, but if you noticed, as soon as I clicked it, it straightened it. I think it picks up on the line. Every once in a while, I don't know, like 70% of the time, it does it what I consider to be the right way. I'm gonna do interior 2016. I have one that's interior brighter, and another one that's even brighter. You know, it's like, hey, it's way bright. This one was a little bit brighter, and that one's actually, it's brighter, but without some of these techniques. Again, it throws some of the look off. So that's that. You know, I could probably heal this right here. Yeah, see, I took some of that out. You can't even tell. I think that looks fine. This one happens to be over that line. I'm not even going to mess with it. But I figured it might pick up a clean area, and it did. So that's that. I feel like I'm leaning a little bit to the left. So get that just a little bit there. 63. In my exposure, a lot of times I'll still knock it up a little bit. It's something I adjust on just about each one. I want to make sure that I'm getting the best looking room. And then these two here, you know, let's see what this looks like when I knock my shadows down. Bring them up. You know, I don't mind this being down a little bit further. You know, this looks good. It's not that attractive with this rug in here, but that room is going to work. Do this. See, check that out. I think that looks pretty good. Went to 53. Yeah, that's good. And in this case, a lot of times I'll bring a little bit of the door out. If I feel like bringing the door out is going to cause this door line to look bowed versus just leaving it over here, then I'll leave it, which is what I'm going to do now. If I bring it here, it just draws attention to this. And man, I used to not care, but these clients, I don't think this particular client would care, but sometimes they get funny about that. They'll be like, you know, it looks like it's bending. It's like, okay. Let's see. So I do have a bend here. So what I do is I go down to distortion, and with this 10mm lens, I found that about 5% or 10%, this is at 15, you see that this looks really straight right now. I'll bring it back to 10, but you get this white right here. So I hit constrain crop, it does that. I do that in bathrooms. In some rooms I'll do that a lot, especially when I have the door frames here. It's not much, but it's enough to make a difference. I have not applied a preset to this, so interior, and it took my distortion out. I gotta add it back. My distortion adjustment is 15. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then another thing that I do, this home didn't have a lot of it, and I'm glad this wood is starting to turn out, is I'll do this white balance. I do this a lot, and when this is out, you'll see a preview of what it's going to look like. You know, if I'm over here, that looks really green. You know, I don't like the way that looks. I hit Control Z. I think I'm fine where I am. But a lot of times you'll just know that the color is off in the room. A lot of bathrooms will come out really blue, and you can literally adjust that here on the temperature versus going down into the other blues. But a lot of times you can take this white balance tool and find something. And this, I may be able to find something in here. Yeah, see, I don't particularly like that as much as what I already had. So that's good. You know, here's the shower. Those are tough for me just even to take a picture of. Let's see if I have any other rooms on this one. Here's a room. Okay. And in this particular case, I'll start out with the preset and see this wood's looking a little orangey, in my opinion, versus what it just looked like. So I'll see if I can get lucky on this wall, see if it adjusts it. Yeah, that's probably more the real color, but I'm not sure if I like what it did. It didn't blow those windows out. Yeah, I may just work from there. The highlights are already brought down. This exposure's up really high. This room's already really clear. So you see I knocked that down. I mean, it was way up here, like too much. And it's bringing the color of that wood down too. So, you know, I don't think that looks bad. It looks better than it did. And then, let's see. I'll leave that all the way down. I mean, that's pretty much it on a photo. This one looks straight to me. You know, maybe just that little touch, but, you know, don't obsess over it. If the room looks straight, I mean, I think that one looks really, really straight. You know, then all of a sudden we pop out back. I'm going to go over to my outside darks. I mean, I think that looks good. Again, I'm always looking at the edge. And sometimes you do that and it'll look like the whole, like everything is leaning, and if that's the case, then I don't do it. You know, if I'm just trying to make a wall straight and I'm having to really push it, you know, and it, again, if all this looks like it's going down a hill, it's like, you know what, it's not horrible. I pushed it back. I still left some on there. I mean, it doesn't look weird, but it's something I always pay attention to because it catches people's eye. You know, in this one, you haven't seen me do a whole lot of cropping. Usually I'm cropping stuff out. You know, if I'm trying to accentuate this whole area here, maybe do something like that. Just take all that junk on the wall out. And then since there's this greenery here, a lot of times you can toy with that and get it to pop a little bit. In this case, I'm bringing the shadows down to bring depth in here because there's different colored greens. And that's a really good area where you can kind of mess with the clarity. You'll see it makes these really sharp and rigid, but you know, I usually will knock that up to 25 at the most. Obviously saturation, you can make your colors really funky. I've found that I just leave them right in this range of 10 to 15 because it's not too extreme. When you get, you know, big front yards full of green grass, it's a bigger topic of conversation. In this particular house, it seems like everything looks pretty good. It's not too crazy green. You know, as far as this property goes, I'll probably do a couple more, but you know, the exteriors that I'm currently working on are a big deal. I have a lot of them. Let's see what else was going on here. Get this to load up. This house is just made of wood. I mean, I know that sounds funny. Here we go. Here's some basement shots. You know, here's one. It's downstairs. Again, I just go to the interior, which you can create. I have a feeling when you just scroll all the way up and you hit plus, and you can create a new preset. You just do that once you have your settings where you want it to be. So interior, I have the exposure knocked up. I always throw a little bit of contrast in there. I mean, it's not really necessary, but it helps. It just brings some life to it. In this case, I may knock that down just a touch. Actually, bring those all the way out to 100. Yeah, I think that looks okay. I've been doing a better job on my tripod of getting these rooms to look straight, but sometimes it's just really tough. You know, a room like this, that preset pretty much did it. Let's take a look in this room here. Interior. You know, that looks good. This wall is straight. You know, at the most I run down here to distortion. You know, 5 or 10 usually does it, but now that wall actually looks straight. The only other thing I do on distortion is this vertical. Sometimes if I'm having to point up or down at something, you can go in and adjust it like that. You know, the wall will look, you know, I took the bow out of it, but it'll look like that. And so you come in and can straighten it. In this case, that looks more straight as 5. I think it does. No, I think that's fine. But remember, I've got the white down here. I need to hit that constrain. You know, we've got some wires over here at the most. You know, might knock those out if I'm not taking away too much of my workbench. Just aesthetically, it looks better. I always try knocking up my exposure to see what it's going to look like. You know, I feel like that's a little dark for what these realtors like to see. They want to see a really lit, you know, clean lit room. The other benefit there is that that's the thing that they have got such a hard time doing, is getting a picture where the room is lit real evenly. And you know, the HDR that I'm doing is what allows us to see that room look so lit. So it's kind of where our value is you know, they get these pictures and they don't know what the magic behind it is. Some of them realize that it's, you know, a bracketed exposure, but you know, they don't know how to do it. So, and they definitely have never done it on their own. Let's see. So that's that. Let's see what else I got. I was in a barn here after this. So this was a really dark area, and the interior here. I mean, I'm really bringing this alive, but you can tell the light is acting funny. I mean, this was dark in here. The shutter stayed open forever, but I mean, it doesn't look bad now. Let's straighten that up a touch. Probably bring some of that out just because there's this funky flare, and I'll probably adjust the distortion on that wall. See how it straightened that plank up? Yeah, that looks a lot better. And then I still feel like we may be able to straighten ourselves up here. See, I'm at 119. Look, it's looking. Oh, and when you spin this, a lot of times it'll take your previous crop out. I don't know why it does that. At least mine does. So, like, I don't know if you noticed that it did that, but once you go back to try to adjust the straightness, the cropped edges will bounce back out to their previous spot, and I hate that. I think it even messed with my distortion. Let's see. No, it didn't, but that still doesn't look right. So there we go. I put that up to 20, and this looks straight. And I haven't even messed with my lighting yet in here. So I'm bringing my exposure up. I mean, this room was dark. I still feel like I could twist that around some. See how it bounced back out? See, I'm looking at this beam right here. I can strain and bring that in. But that's good. And I don't know, there's a button you can do before and after. Yeah. So there's my before, there's my after. There's a pretty big difference. Just hit, there we go. Took some decent shots from a distance here. Let's say I'm probably where I need to be on that. That outside light seems to be working really good on this one. Exposure, yeah, so I've got my exposure down. In this case, I'm going to bring the highlights down because it's showing the sky, which is usually what that's good for. Oh yeah, check that out. When I take those shadows out, it's actually adding back to that green, so that looks really good. I even have my darks. Bring my darks down just a touch. I think that looks pretty solid. Trying to work off this line. I was looking at this, so I'm looking at these lines right here. I think that looks better. Maybe brighten this up just a touch. So now I'm actually able to go back to my exposure and knock it up, because my other adjustments brought everything down as far as the brightness, but I still have my good color in my greens, and I'm able to knock that up a little bit. See if I'm able to mess with this blue or not. Yeah, check that out. So that looks cool. So that's that. You know, here's a front photo. Outside light seems to be working for me. Oops. You know what? In this case, even though 120 photos, go back. And you can, I don't know if you knew this, you can tell the ones that you've adjusted because they'll have these little marks on them. So I'm going to go here again to save myself time and hit copy, because I'm basically in the same environment. Just save myself some time. Hit paste. Yeah, just a slight adjustment there. I don't know if it's the adjustment that I want, but I mean, it works. Yeah, probably make that a little bit brighter. The shadows. So you get in that saturation, make those greens in the wood just look crazy. In this particular case, it doesn't even look too bad at 30. Normally it's too high. Normally this would just look really, really wrong. But it looks good. These beams look straight. I mean, that's pretty much it. I can do like this and hit paste and see what happens. Yeah, it's okay. Again, I would probably go back to the last one I did. Hit copy. Yeah, that got me closer. There's a lot of light coming in from right here, and I don't know if you ever use these gradient filters or not. If I do that and I knock the exposure down, even that tree out, and that only comes to right here. I don't know what the deal is with the rest of this. If it may apply a little bit, but usually I don't find that it does. So stretch that out. Sometimes you just can't use these because it'll affect a bunch of other stuff, but again, on that tree, it evens that tree out a lot. In this case, this grass isn't doing us any favors, so this actually will look decent, almost like a wide angle shot. That's what people believe when they see that. They start getting all excited. They're like, oh, I love that photo, that wide photo, and all you really did is crop the bottom off. Let's see here. You know, in this case, this barn looks a lot better with a high clarity. It brings the wood out. You know, it brings this wood out a lot more. Another thing I look at a lot of times with clarity is I look at the leaves. But, you know, the goal is to make each one of these photos look the best that it can. You know, I don't ever want to rush through these to the point where I'm not paying attention to what each image looks like, especially because I don't know which one the agent's going to use. You know, there's in this particular property there was a lot, you know, 120, but these were new clients of mine, and I want to make sure to impress them. And so I took maybe a little bit more than I normally would. There was a decent amount of features going on here. So anyway, the point is that I don't know, you know, they may love this photo. I think there's probably a better one of the front of this house, but you know, the last thing I'm going to do is skip over this or just hit it real fast. And there's a good example of this being oversaturated, which normally happens for me on that preset, which is why I created this one. It's a little bit lighter. The greens aren't so crazy, but everything else is a little bit more washed out. And come in here, touch that exposure down, straighten this up. You know, this is another one where this driveway isn't doing me any favors, so I just probably bring it out to about here. Try not to do that too much because in the MLS it doesn't look that great when they're long, but you know, they're good photos. When people just love those, at least I think they do. Let's see, I'm bring those highlights down, makes that blue pop real big time. You know, to compensate for that, a lot of times you gotta knock the exposure back up, but you notice this tree or whatever this thing is, bush, starts to look real HDR, and I want to avoid that. So bring some of this brightness back, knock some of this down. You know, it looks a little more natural even just by slipping this that much. This tree over here is looking pretty dried out. I'll probably take a bit of him out. It's a nice feature for the picture, but I don't need all this extra crunchiness. You know, it's another case where maybe apply a filter here, but I'll be alright without it. I'm knocking this saturation up, and all I'm getting is a lot of green right here and making this more orange, so I want to do that. And again, normally I don't go past 20-25 on that. The clarity's knocked down in this preset. I'm going to bring it up. Look at that. Probably bring it up to 30. I'll really take a look at what it looks like when I bring the darks down in this photo. Yeah, usually just a touch. So even if you end up want to spend some time setting, I haven't done it, set some presets that do each of these increments a little bit more. I mean, it's really easy to get in there and flip those switches. The sharpness is 1 on this one, it's at 0, and I should have knocked it up. And then this is a perfect one for the sky. Come in here, bring that sky down just a little bit, but you notice it doesn't affect the rest of the picture. But I get a really blue sky out of the deal. So that looks good. So that looks a lot better. You know, there's our before and there's our after. That's a pretty big difference. I spent a little bit of time on it. But that's a great photo. So another thing that you can try is doing a common word for it is mass action. I forget what they call it, but you know, these are all interior photos, and I don't think this is going to work all that well in this particular case, but I'm going to show it as an example. So you click one and you hold down shift and we go over to here, and this auto sync has to be on, and I can apply this filter, which is my interior, to all of those at the same time. And that can save a lot of time. I can see that some of these are already too bright, But again, that's, you know, if I were to do that to the whole batch of interiors, let's say there was 80 interiors, man, that's a lot of time that you're saving clicking around. You just want to be careful that you don't leave these selected. I've done this before, and then I start adjusting it, and it's adjusting all of these. You know, you want to click off and make sure you're on one photo. You go in there and adjust it. You know, this color, it's just a funky bathroom, but I'd go in there and adjust that. But sometimes, you know, when you've got all of these that look relatively the same, you can get lucky, and you know, you get there and you go, hey, you know, this doesn't look so bad. You know, you may, again, the only thing you may need to do is go in and straighten the room up. I'm looking here and looking right here, looking right here. Maybe do that. Hit your exposure. See, yeah, bringing this exposure down seems to look real well. So another thing you can do is find what looks right. You know, do your preset, find one, adjust it just a little bit, and then hit copy. Then paste it to a bunch of them. Anyway, you'll find that sometimes that works to save a whole lot of time. And then when you export, it helps. So let's look at exporting. So let's just say I was done with this whole set. I would click here, come all the way down, click here, get the whole set. I hit Control Shift and E, just a keystroke to export. You need to choose where you want this to go to. I've got so many photos now, I'm saving these to an external hard drive. It works really well. I used to worry about the speed, but I'm not having any speed issues. So this guy, and then I always save the folder. I call it Lightroom because I know it's my final one. Lightroom. I know these will be my finals. Select folder, so now it's definitely going to go in there. And then the other thing I've been doing recently is I'm naming it. This was Fairview. There's actually a name for it if I have it on my list here. Dun, 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 dun. Harry Hall was the name of it. I try to do the Harry Hall. Try to do it like that, and then it'll number it sequentially, and you can pick what you want it to start as here. I have this right here also set. It's very important. Your file size. So that's 1.5 megabytes. I don't know why they put kilobytes there, but they do. If you're ever wanting to just do your own, just full strength, you can do 100%, but your file sizes are going to come out really large. I'm doing 300 megapixel or 300 pixels per inch. I remove the location information and personal information, and I don't do any watermarks. So really, I set where it's going to go. I create the folder, I create the file name, and you can hit export, and it's going to export all of those the way you want it.